this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast. Here's our summer school series. It rolls on. And today, it's a big one. It's my man, Sam Webb. We are talking Michigan. It's always a blast. Sam, welcome back again, man.
Hey, glad to be back, Bud. Always fun. I was actually getting messages saying, Sam, are you going to be back with Bud again this year? It's like, hey, man, it's an annual thing. Wouldn't miss it. Looking forward to it.
And I feel like now all the publishers are running like, here's our opponent summer school series with 10 more articles there. And as a guy used to run a team site, 100%. July can be a content challenge at times, but a lot of stuff going on with Michigan, including obviously, Sharon Moore's first year as a head coach last year, a major recruiting win. You getting Bryce Underwood down the stretch. What's the general vibe now in Ann Arbor?
I think they are hugely optimistic about what year two could bring. The end of the year was momentum. You started out on a high note, just on the buzz of Sharon coming in, but they hit an obvious dip. A lot of questions about, what direction were they going to go in? Offensively, you had no rudder where you couldn't really complete a forward pass. The offensive line really was a shell of its former self. Defensively, they had actually kind of fallen off the roadmap a bit as you had a transition with coordinator, as you well know, and then a lot of injuries on that side of the ball. And then a little bit after the halfway point, they really hit their stride defensively, and that kind of changed the outlook for the remainder of the season. And they played to that, and that was all she wrote. As they played to that defense, started running the ball more. Obviously, they beat Ohio State, beat Alabama, got Bryce Underwood, and that was the momentum that carried them into the offseason and obviously carried them into this season with a much more positive outlook.
So let's go to quarterback, obviously, and the offense. New offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey comes in. Two options at quarterback: Mikey Keene, of course, from Fresno and UCF, and then Bryce Underwood, who, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. I don't think he's Cam Newton,
right?
But I mean, the running and the passing it was very, very special, and the tools and the upside appear to be there. So you got to be super excited. How do you think this shapes out with the new offense and the new quarterbacks?
So, Bud, it's interesting as we kind of set the foundation for the year, if you will. Year one of Sharon Moore, I thought, was revelatory in this way. You look at the difference between offense and defense in year one. It wasn't just a personnel thing and everything he had returning. I think it was also in the composition of the staff. You look at the composition of that defensive staff. You had obviously Wink Martindale, veteran defensive coordinator, all that NFL experience. But you look at all of the defensive position coaches, you had all those guys had coordinator experience. Brian Jean-Marie had been a coordinator. Lamar Morgan had been a coordinator. Lou Esposito had been a coordinator. You look on offense, a lot of guys who hadn't had as much experience. So a much more inexperienced coaching staff under a first-time head coach with a lot of newness, a lot of inexperience on offense as well. I think that didn't bode well for that offense as they hit a lot of troubled water. So now you head into this season. I think it sets up much better when you have likely a freshman quarterback and you're coming into it with a veteran coordinator in Chip Lindsey, who's been down this road before, knows how to nurture a quarterback, knows how to take an offense and mold into it. So he's not going to come and try and reinvent the wheel, but he is going to come in and try to tweak it in a way that accentuates their positives, but kind of gives them some things from a passing perspective that they didn't have, and kind of grows up a young quarterback in a way that isn't too much of a shock to the system. Like you see a lot of young quarterbacks, if you give them too much too soon, you can derail them before they even get started. You don't want to do that to Bryce Underwood.
Makes a lot of sense there. How many games before he starts do you think?
So I really think he starts day one.
Okay.
It's really, I think you got to be careful. And this is
sure.
This is the the thing that if you are a Michigan fan, you you got to be concerned with Bryce Underwood. Things were so bad offensively from the quarterback. This is not to denigrate or disparage the individual guys last year, but things were so bad from a performance perspective last year. And Bryce is so immensely talented. It's like everything he does is going to look fantastic, right? It's like, oh my God, he's going to look like Cam Newton, with everything he does. And so there's this rush, I think, to anoint him. And I think that not from a coaching perspective, but it can make you feel like he is ahead of a lot of where a lot of other freshmen would be. And while he is from a physical perspective, you've covered this long enough. There are certain steps that every freshman has to take. There are certain growing pains that every freshman has to go through. And I don't think that Bryce is going to be immune to that. And so I think that there are the pieces around him that, to me, frankly, are going to have to be really good for them to be, or it's going to have to be better than they were for them to be as good as they need to be. Offensive line being among them. I know we're going to talk about them, but that's my concern. Like, he's a guy who is a otherworldly physical talent, but I don't know that you can really expect him to lift the offense around him in the way that's necessary for them to be a championship team as a true freshman. I think the guys around him have to be much better than they were last year if they're really going to rise to that level.
Which would include a heavy dose of the run game, most likely. Justice Haynes comes in, Jordan Marshall, who was really damn good down the stretch. I assume it'll be by committee, but if it's not, is there a guy we're picking to bust out? Like if the one guy takes over, who is that guy and why?
So it'll be committee. Michigan has for my lifetime been a 2 running back team, but for Mike Hart.
Yeah.
That's really the only time in my
life. Way back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only time in my life that they've been like a 1 running back team. So, it'll be Justice Haynes and Jordan Marshall. And Jordan Marshall, like you said, finished the season on a real high note, 100 yards rushing against Alabama. And that's a game where, again, they didn't throw the ball. I mean, there was no passing game to speak of. I mean, you're at the end of that game, and you remember Alex Orji had to come in because your starting quarterback gets knocked out of the game with an injury. So clearly they weren't throwing the football at all, and you still get 100 yards rushing out of Jordan Marshall. And then you come in with Justice Haynes, who gives you a home run threat as well, comes from Bama. He obviously runs between the tackles, really physical runner, knows how Michigan likes to get down from a running back aspect. So I just, while you aren't going to come in there and expect them to be exactly what they were, I don't know that if you're a Michigan fan, you're expecting for the drop-off to be precipitous. You think from a running back perspective, that part is going to be pretty much on par. It really boils down to, are the guys in front of them, the guys paving the way for them, are they going to be better than they were last year?
I think it makes a lot of sense. Offensively, through the air. So you lose Colston Loveland. Receiver last year was not a strength for this offense. I think we can put it kindly there. Who's catching the ball for this team in 2025?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. So I tend to think that it was I don't put as much of the burden for, or much of the blame for why the passing game wasn't up to snuff on the receivers.
Okay.
I think it has more to do a combination of protection and quarterback play. I think those two things were bigger contributors. Now, that's not to say that receivers doing a better job of getting open wasn't somewhat of an issue, but I don't think that was the biggest issue. I do think that they have improved in that aspect. They went and got Donovan McCulley from Indiana, who gives them a big target out there. And that was one of the things. They didn't have size at the receiver position. So you go and grab him from Indiana. He gives you a big 6'3", 6'4", can give you the huge catch radius target, former quarterback at the position. So he has that understanding. We've seen him be a guy who's been capable of making big plays down the field. He showed those flashes in spring ball. You come back with a guy like Fred Moore who gives you some deep threat ability. I think they're expecting him to take a step this year. You got some other returning guys, a guy like Samaj Morgan who gives you some gadget ability. You come in also with a good freshman class. I think Andrew Marsh is a guy who they're really expecting to also take a step. You got some pieces, but at receiver that I think are really going to be able to fill the role. But who's going to step up and be that consistent, guy who can be the pacifier for the quarterback? If I had to pick a guy, I would say it would be Donovan McCulley at the receiver position. And at tight end, there will not be a replacement for Colston Loveland. That guy just does not exist. But you did have some flashes from Marlon Klein last year. I think that he's from a blocking perspective, the most ready, the most complete tight end. But as a pass catcher, I really like Hogan Hansen, and I think they're really encouraged by what he's shown. So I think it'll be more of a combination at tight end. Long and short of it, I think you have enough guys in there where they're going to have a more complete passing game. But again, I'm going to come back to the offensive line. How much time are you going to give a true freshman quarterback to do what they want to do? Play action passing going to be in there. They're going to be more RPO with Chip Lindsey. The passing game is going to be more complete, but you're going to have to give him some protection in order to make that passing game get off.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, let's hit a break here. On the flip side, we'll talk a little Wolverines defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, guys, welcome back in here to the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast Summer School Edition. That's my man, Sam Webb, the Michigan Insider, talking Michigan, all things Wolverines. So last year, the offense, which we just discussed, sputtered at times, maybe like several months, and then down the stretch kind of found its footing enough to play some complimentary football. But what they were complimenting was the defense, which was pretty good all year and really, really good down the stretch, and was reminiscent a little bit of the 23 title team. But now they do lose an awful lot of names that NFL fans are getting accustomed to with training camp opening up. Who are the guys, like if this unit avoids a real drop-off, who are the guys, Sam, who will have stepped up at the end of the year?
Oh, yeah. So you, I think, are looking at the linebacker position to really take a huge leap forward this year from a playmaking perspective. I really start there. I know a lot of folks are going to start at the edge position with Derek Moore, and I do think he's poised to have an outstanding season. I mean, he's a guy who's played a lot of football for Michigan now, played on that championship team. He finished the year in rousing fashion, had a couple of sacks against Alabama. We'll talk more about the defensive line in a bit. But a guy I believe I talked a bit about on last year's edition of this show as a 5-star addition in the transfer portal was Jayshawn Barham.
Yeah.
It took him a minute to go from being just a 5-star athlete to being a 5-star player. And having done this, there's a difference. I mean, he could run around and be physical with the best of them, but making plays, it didn't really manifest in the form of him making plays until really the second half of the year. I mean, he was out of position in the passing game a lot early in the season. He would not fit the run well some early in the season, and then sort of halfway through Big Ten play, it was like a light bulb kind of clicked, man. And here he is making plays in the backfield, in the run game. He is all over the place. He's even making plays in coverage. And he was contemplating making the jump to the NFL. and they were talking to him about maybe, getting drafted as an edge, sort of a guy who could play in the mold of maybe a Micah Parsons. He has that physical profile, and he decided to come back. And Michigan, they're saying, hey, we aren't gonna, after contemplating maybe playing him in that role, said, no, we kind of like you in the stack linebacker position who can still do some of that moving you, playing you at edge, but they like his ability to play all over the defense because his playmaking ability that he showed late in the season and then throughout the spring has just been next level. And then Ernest Hausman, the linebacker next to him, he started emerging as a playmaker earlier in the season than Barham. He struggled early. First 3 or 4 games of the season, had a really tough time against Texas, especially. They almost benched him. And then after that, the light bulb clicked for him. He started making a lot of plays in coverage. He really stepped up. Jimmy Rolder, their backup. That's another guy. There are a lot of teams. I haven't even talked about it. A lot of teams really kind of pursued him in the transfer portal, tried to pull him away from Michigan. He decided to stay. Another playmaker. So I think the linebacker spot, Troy Bowles, they went and got him from Georgia. A lot of people thought, well, why is a dude? Why should you be excited about him? Georgia had like 12 5-star linebackers.
Georgia got Allen and Wilson, and they got a bunch of dudes who are going to be playing on Sundays.
A bunch of dudes, right? And so, your depth at linebacker, a lot of guys who can run around and make plays at that spot. And I think Michigan at that spot is going to be deep. They're going to be talented. They're going to be experienced. That is the spot that I look to as the major playmaking spot, not just at the starting spot, but even the backups. And then one more to mention, and a guy that I think that they are really super excited about. Remember this name, because he's a dude that I literally was just texting with him before I came on the show. But Cole Sullivan, kid out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's about 6'4". He's up to about 235, 240 pounds. Super athlete. He's right up there with Jayshawn Barham as one of the best athletes on the team. Took a huge step in the spring. And he's one of the reasons why they're going to be able to play Jayshawn on the edge some this year, because Cole Sullivan is really taking that kind of leap. So again, I'm telling you, a lot more depth, playmaking ability. That's the spot where I think you're going to see a lot more guys making plays this year.
All right, so the secondary and the defensive front loses a lot. Which group are we more confident can replace the production lost, and why?
So that's a really tough. That's a tough question. I don't think that you're going to see either spot. When you say replace the production, they won't replace the production.
Minimize the drop-off.
There you go. That's a better way to put it. That's a much better way to put it. I think the defensive line will do a better job of minimizing the drop-off because they have so many guys. They are going to play 8 defensive linemen. I mean, they are, and they're huge. So they won't have the playmakers. These were the 2 greatest interior defensive linemen in the history of the program, and Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. We talked about them last year. Like, these were beasts up front. You don't replace them, right? So what Michigan has, though, are like 5 or 6 guys that are all like 320, right? So, you go and you get Damon Payne from Bama. He's not going to come in and be a guy who's going to give you Mason Graham like ability to get upfield and rush the passer, but he's going to 2-gap you. He's going to go and plug the run. He's going to give you, a lot of that.
Wasn't he a Michigan kid? I'm trying to think back to his.
He is. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a bounce back home. Okay.
Yeah, he's from Belleville. Former 5-star guy. So he's going to come in. He's really going to be a run plugger in the middle. You go and get Trey Williams from Clemson. He's going to be more of that guy who can get up the field and give you some interior rush, right? So you got him, Rayshawn Benny. If there's a guy who's going to step up and maybe give you a little bit of that production that you got from those guys last year, I think he's maybe the guy, the returning guy that they expect to maybe give you some of that. So Rayshawn Benny, I think for him, pad level, playing lower, is what they're looking to see him do. That if he does that a little bit more, he'll up his production. Trey Pierce is a guy that I think they've seen some dudes really kind of up their games heading into the spring, and they're encouraged by how much they've grown. Ike Awana, another 320-pounder that they can roll in there up front and really feel good that they aren't going to see a huge amount of drop-off. They can just roll a lot of bodies in there. And then on the edge is where I think they're going to get the playmaking ability. Okay. So in the last year, they got the playmakers from interior. Now you're going to see, but it's going to return to where we've seen prior to Mason and KG. It was Aiden Hutchinson, it was guys like that where you saw coming from the outside making the plays. Now it's going to be Derek Moore. TJ Guy is a guy who stepped up, and really they're expecting to take a step and be a big time playmaker off the edge. And then, I think they saw in the spring some of their young guys really take some steps and show them that they're ready to, step up here in the fall and maybe give them some production. Come the fall is maybe be some pass rushers. So I think they're expecting some of the young players to hopefully give them some pass rush when the fall rolls around and help them in that way. Guys like maybe you get a little bit of that from Dom Nichols. They got a little bit of that from him in the spring. They think that's going to translate to the fall as well. And secondary, you mentioned the secondary. So secondary, the guys returning, you really look to. I mean, he was a highly rated guy coming out. We call him Suge. Nickname is Suge. You go out and you talk about a kid from Illinois who stepped onto the field last year, and from a athlete perspective was outstanding. But when it came down to the fundamentals and studying film, I think that's where they were looking for him to really take a step and show that he could do the things that you saw Will Johnson do. So this year, I think it's going to be time from a coaching perspective. They look out at the corner position, and Jair Hill is a guy that they're expecting to take a real big step this year, but he has to be more consistent. Gave up a lot of double moves, so they want to see him be more consistent in that regard, study more tape, be more of a conventional guy in that way. If he can do that, the natural athleticism is there. And then the guy on the other corner was maybe the most improved player on the whole defense, and that's Zeke Berry. Started out at nickel, and played nickel, played safety, finished the year at corner after moving over to corner in the Oregon game and really holding his own. And by the end of the season, he's a playmaker at corner, really holding it down against Ohio State of all teams, and then Alabama. So those are the two corners heading into the season. Now you're trying to find who are your depth guys at corner. So you got a couple of different players that could maybe emerge. Caleb Anderson is a guy that they came over, and he came over from Louisiana Lafayette. I think they're really pleased with how he came along. And then you're seeing who else is going to emerge at the corner position opposite that to really help you out. That's why I say you're really concerned about the corner depth, about who's going to emerge there. Safety, they got a ton of guys. I talked about Rod Moore. I think they're really confident about what he's going to provide if he's healthy. But even if he's not, a range of guys. They went out in the transfer portal, Bud, went over to Arkansas and really rated, I thought, one of the best guys in the portal. I don't know.
Metcalf,
yeah. TJ Metcalf, I thought was one of the best guys in the portal. He is going to help them out a ton at nickel. And then you look back at the safety spot, you got a few different guys that are going to really going to help them out. Jaden Mangum is back. He didn't really play last year, so he's back at safety. You got a few different guys who are going to be factors in that room. So really deep at the safety position.
So this schedule's interesting to me for a couple different reasons. One, you play a lot of mobile quarterbacks. Like looking through this, I don't know what New Mexico's going to have, but obviously Mateer can really run at Oklahoma. USC is much more quarterback mobility than they've been in some recent years. Damon Williams for Washington can scoot. Like if you watch that bowl game against Louisville, he went like 300, 200. I mean, he's like, that's not normal, obviously. Childs at Michigan State, and then Northwestern, no with Stone. Maryland will have some, and then obviously saying no. But there's a lot of the kind of, I don't say run around, but there's a little more mobile quarterbacks I think you typically face in a Michigan schedule. So I'm heartened by the linebacker report. That's a lot of juice to chase down, some of those good mobile guys. But it's certainly not an easy schedule with at Oklahoma, at Nebraska, at USC, at Michigan State. Even at Maryland can be annoying. It was 2 years ago for them when they won the national title, right? So how do you define success for this squad in 25, Sam?
So, I think it's a year where you build. I think the notion that they are going to come out and really go through this season unscathed and be a sort of a national championship, Big Ten championship team. It's hard for me to see that with a true freshman that you're going to have to grow up. I do see them being a playoff contender. I think it really rides on the development of the offensive line. I call that an if-then. If the offensive line develops, then their playoff hopes by the end of the season will be intact. Right? I see them losing a couple of games at least this year, but it'll just be a couple of games if the offensive line develops. If not, there'll be a 4 or 5 loss team. But there's a real shot there. You mentioned the mobile quarterbacks. I'm not as concerned about the defense. I think that they have enough talent on defense. Oklahoma is concerned. I mean, I think Mateer's going to hit the ground running. You get his OC in there. That offense is going to be humming even in week 2 when Michigan gets there. And, maybe even without their head coach, if Sharon, assuming if the NCAA accepts that self-imposed punishment, then Sharon will be sitting out that game. Well, that's going to make that game even more difficult, right? You got to slow down that offense. Man, you better have that offensive line humming, hoping that you can run the football and keep that offense off the field. To me, I'm going to get back to how I started. You got to be able to control some of these games running the football some. But here's the catch-22 of it that we've been talking about a lot as well. You also got to grow up this offense too and grow up this quarterback. You got to advance your passing game. So there's a balance to it. You can't be ultra dependent on your run game. You can't be bully ball to the point where you're so belligerent with the run that you're defeating the purpose of your offense, where you're trying to grow up your passing game. So there's going to be a balance to this that is going to be interesting to see how they achieve it. And that's where having a veteran like Chip Lindsey in the fold is going to be good for Michigan and really interesting to watch from a media perspective.
For sure. Sam, really enjoyed this. I think I'm going to see you in Vegas, right?
You absolutely are. Can't wait to see all the different media in Vegas.
Well behaved.
And how, first of all, how the media adapts to being in Vegas, covering Big Ten Media Days, and then what the perspective is on the Big Ten heading into, obviously Sharon Moore, year 2, Ohio State coming off a national championship, right? What's the outlook in league this year, and then of course national championship picture as well. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Enjoyed it, buddy. Be well.
All right, thanks a lot.